Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can get input from the user in C++. So let's get into it. So the only thing that I have written in my program right now is this cout statement that says input your name. But as you can see, when the program runs, it says input your name in the console, and then it doesn't really let me write anything after it, and it just terminates the program automatically. So how can I make the input possible? So first of all, I'm going to create a variable which is going to be a string, and it's going to be called name. Now I'm not going to initialize it yet, meaning I'm not going to assign it any value because I want the value of this variable to be the thing that I'm going to input. And now I'm going to cin, so I'm going to input characters to the console. And then the arrows, actually found out that these arrows have a special name. When you're using cout, it's called insertion, is stream insertion operator. And when you're using cin, they're called stream extraction operator. So I didn't know that, but apparently that's a thing. So I'm going to say cin and then the stream extraction operator, and then the name of the variable, which is going to be name. And then I want to cout another statement, which is going to say my name is, and then plus the name that I've inputted. So let me run this. This is going to say input your name. It's going to let me write in the console now, and I'm going to say Mike, and then it's going to say my name is Mike. So basically what happened is I created this variable. It's uninitialized. It doesn't have a value. And then I outputted input your name. And then the input is going to be where I'm going to store inside of this variable. So I inputted Mike, and so name is now going to have the value of Mike. And then I outputted my name is plus the name that I inputted, which is going to be Mike, so my name is Mike. Let me actually add an exclamation point right there. So let me run this again. Let me say my name is Max. It's going to say my name is Max. So those are the basics of how you can input, how you can get input from the user. Now, instead of these plus signs, I can just write the stream insertion operator again. So the arrows and this one as well. And this is just going to compound the command. So it's going to cout my name is, and then the name, and then the exclamation point. So this is completely equivalent to using the plus signs. And you can also do this with cin. So let me say string name and string last name, like so. And I want to cin name, and then I want to cin the last name. So instead of using separate cin statements, I'm just going to do this like this. So I'm going to add the stream extraction operator twice in order to input both variables. And then I'm going to say my name is, and then the name, and then my last name is, oops, and then the stream insertion operator again. Oops, let me just add the last name, which I forgot to do. So last name. So now let me run this to see if it works. Okay, so input your name. I'm going to say Mike, and then it's going to ask me to input the last name. So I'm going to say Morgan. And then it's going to say my name is Mike, my last name is Morgan. This is really weird because I didn't put a space in there. Wait, let me do that really quickly. Let me say name and then the exclamation point, my last name is blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to say Mike again, and then Morgan, and it's going to say my name is Mike, my last name is Morgan. Okay, so another interesting thing is that you don't really have to write this in separate commands. I can just delete this. So instead of writing this, I'm going to write string name, comma, and then last name. And this is just going to create two separate variables called name and last name, which are both going to be strings. And you can actually put an indefinite number, any number of variables that you want in the same statement when you're creating the variable, as long as they are the same data type. So now let me show you what happens when you try to input something that isn't a string. So first of all, let me just delete this to make this a little bit simpler. Let me delete the last name as well. So now let me run this again. And this time I'm going to output an integer, for example, 20. As you can see, when I run this is just going to output my name is 20. You can see that no error is thrown. Everything seems to be working correctly, although this is not the required data type. So what is happening here? So when you input something to the console, the program is automatically going to try to convert that input into the data type that is required. In this case, I required a string. So the program is going to try to convert 20, which is an integer, into a string data type. And that is possible. In C++, anything can be converted to a string. An integer can be converted, even like Boolean, float, any data type can be converted. So you just have to put double quotation marks around it and you have a string. And so when you input 20, although that is a number, right? That is an integer. If you put double quotation marks around it, it turns it into a string. So that's what the program does, and it outputs my name is 20. Everything works correctly. Now let me show you another example. So I'm going to create a variable called num. It's going to be an integer, and I'm going to cin num. And then I'm going to cout that num. So if I run this, let me input, for example, 20, and it's going to output 20 automatically. Now, if I try to input, for example, a float, what happens then? I'm going to say 10.4. It is just going to output 10. So like I said, the program is going to try to convert the input into the required data type. And since I'm requiring an int but inputting a float, what the program needs to do is it needs to cut off the decimal point. So that's what it does, and so it outputs 10. So let me run this again. What happens if I put a string or like a letter, a character, for example? So if I run this, you can see that this is going to output 0. Now, what is happening here? Now, of course, what I've inputted isn't the required data type. And unfortunately, the program doesn't know how to convert it into the required data type because a character isn't convertible into an integer. And so it's just going to output 0 to indicate that something went wrong and that the output is not correct. Of course, if I cin 0, it's going to output 0, not because the input isn't correct, but because I told it to do so. But most of the times when 0 is the output, it means that you've inputted something that isn't the correct data type, and you should probably look into that. So I apologize for the abrupt cut, but I actually realized that something was wrong with my audio, but I fixed it now, so let's keep going. So I'm going to create another variable here, which is going to be called num2. Let me cin num2, and let me cout num2, like so. And let me just add an end line here so that the values don't get mushed together. So if I run this code, it's going to ask me to input a number. I'm going to input 20. It's going to output that number, and it's going to ask me to input another number, and it's going to output the second number. Now, what happens when I type invalid input? So let me type M, let me click enter. Notice that this is going to output 2 values, and it's going to terminate the program, and it's not going to let me input the second number. So what is happening here? So first of all, I get a 0 because an error occurred, right? I've inputted the wrong data type. The program doesn't know how to work with this data type since I've required an integer but inputted a character, and so it's going to throw an error. It's going to terminate, and it's not going to let me input anything else unless I fix that error. And then the second value, 8, is a random value, which is what is stored in the memory location of the second variable. So what do I mean by this? So I've created these 2 variables, and when you create a variable, your computer automatically creates a special location in memory where it's going to store that variable. Now, I haven't given these variables a value because I want the value of them to be what I'm inputting, right? And so what the computer is going to store in the memory location that is reserved for these variables is going to be just some random number, right? Because the variables don't have a value yet, and so they just have a random number as a value. And so when the program terminates, it doesn't let me input the value of the second variable. And so it's just going to output the random number that is stored in the memory location reserved for that variable, which in this case is going to be 8. So that's why this is happening. Now I only have two more things to show you. The first one is going to be cin.fail. So cin.fail is going to tell you if there has been an error in your program. So let me type cin.fail, and I need parentheses, and I need to output this. So let me say cout cin.fail. So if I run this, let me output num1, it's going to be 20, and then I'm going to put an invalid input. As you can see, it's going to output 0, right, because there's been an error, and so the program needs to terminate, and it outputs 0 automatically. And then 1 was outputted as well. So this 1 comes from this cin.fail statement, which outputted 1 because there has been an error, and so this is going to equal true, right, because the program failed, the input failed, and I have to correct that error, and so cin.fail is going to return true because there has been an error, and so 1 is equivalent to true in C++. If I run this again and I type 20 and then I type 30, then it's going to output 0, right, because there hasn't been a failure, there hasn't been an error, and so it returns false, which is equivalent to 0 in C++. And the last thing I want to show you is going to be the getline function. So function is basically a piece of code that has a certain functionality that you can perform on something. So let me say string name, and then I want to cin name. So if I run this and I try to input two names, so this is going to be the first and the last name. Wait, let me just cout name here. Cout name. Forgot to do that. I'm so sorry. So let me just terminate this and let me write that again. So let me write Mike Morgan. As you can see, this is only going to output the first word of the input, although it has two words. That's because the program needs to know when it has to terminate, and it usually knows when it has to terminate if it sees a white space, a tab, or a paragraph. So I put a white space here, and so that told the program that it was supposed to terminate, and so when I output name, it's only going to output the first name. It's going to ignore the second, because by the time I typed in the second name, it had already terminated. So how can I go around this? So instead of using cin name, I'm going to use getline. So this is going to be my function getline. I'm going to pass in cin inside of the parenthesis, and then I'm going to pass in the name of the variable, which is going to be name. So this is going to cin the entire line that I input, and it's going to store it inside of name. So if I run this and I write Mike Morgan, as you can see, this is going to print Mike Morgan to the console because getline allowed me to store the entire name inside of the variable name. So I think that's all I have to show you today. I hope this was easy to understand. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.